why choose asymmetry and how this can make your life better. So a while ago, I made a post in my Facebook account about commonalities on a conceptual level between notions of physics and hypnosis and all that jazz. So, by the way, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Orestes Vasilakis. I'm a hypnotist, a hypnotherapist, and a theoretical physicist. I used to work in academia in the past. That's where I come from. So, okay, first of all, let's talk a bit about symmetry, and we will talk about a bit about it later too. So, symmetry is viable in physics, in science. It's a very viable thing to look for symmetries because symmetries are basically organizing principles that allow us to make sense of the world around us. So when there is a symmetry, there is predictability, things are quantifiable, measurable. Essentially, we know what's going on. And you can see how, in an everyday life setting, this also means that things feel safe when they are predictable. We don't have to use a lot of energy power, we can be calm. Okay? So, symmetry has a value, a really important value. At the same time, there are situations where too much focus on symmetry can be problematic. So sometimes people say that, theoretical physicists, we study spherical horses in vacuum. And yeah, make what you want out of that. It essentially means we find like very symmetric solutions that are very beautiful and don't apply in the real world. And yeah, looking for supersymmetry at LHC was actually an example of that. We didn't find it there. It may still exist. No one knows. The point is that we were so focused to finding something, a symmetric principle, to explain some things in the world. It would explain them if we found it, but we didn't. It isn't there. So, what shall we do then? Right? They are still looking for stuff. The point is, though, if we take this to the level of culture, this very intense focus on symmetry, things reach another level, right? Like if you type about symmetry and symmetry in culture and stuff, you at some point you will get like things about aesthetics and basically beauty, and you will start seeing a lot of posts about, oh, which celebrity has the most symmetric face, and this person's face is that percent symmetric and this other person's is not. So symmetry is a lot associated with beauty to an unnatural degree because it's not always there. And I will say in everyday life, symmetry to the things we meet at the level of human experience, symmetry is mostly not there. Okay, so there is a point where focusing too much on predictability, on symmetry, is not serving us. Because truth is, no one has a fully symmetric face, and insisting on that can cause body image issues to people, and self-confidence issues, and anxiety, and all other things. Okay, and in the same manner, more general, in life, choosing fully symmetric life outcomes, like constantly seeking the ideal and burning out in the process of chasing it, can also be very problematic in many, many cases. Okay, so um, being too focused on symmetry has its issues, although it has some advantages as it gives some predictability and some safety. Okay, now the interesting thing is that things go even further. You know, in our culture, in the Western culture at least, we have an appreciation of asymmetry. Actually, let me take it a step back. Uh, to the extent I know, many cultures have an appreciation of asymmetry in different ways. In Western cultures, we have this notion of golden ratio, and the funny thing is, we are so obsessed with symmetry that people confuse the golden ratio with symmetry. While the golden ratio actually is not really symmetric, it's actually this balance between symmetry and asymmetry. And this creates an alluring effect that attracts our attention because it's like this slight slight asymmetry. And it's like having this asymmetry through a Fibonacci sequence, but progresses in a patterned, predictable way and reaches an ideal point. That's the golden ratio. So, yeah, and that's actually something that attracts our attention and we consider beautiful as well, this slight asymmetry. Okay. And other cultures as well, like, for example, the Japanese, appreciate asymmetry and appreciate even more the value of imperfection. Like something doesn't have to be just slightly asymmetric, can have a lot of imperfections. And this is the notion of wabi-sabi. So a completely different appreciation of asymmetry there. Okay. And I know this is getting a bit philosophical. So at this point, I want to ask actually a bigger philosophical question, which is symmetry really an inherent part of nature or a convenience we actually use to study it? Okay. And this can be a bigger discussion, but it is something to ponder. Is it just a convenience or an inherent part of nature? And my physicist friends will have opinions there for sure. Okay, but no matter what the answer to this question is, the fact is that it does us a disservice, both in science and in culture, to insist in looking for it everywhere when it's not there, because it's not always there. Okay? So, from this point of view, I prefer to think symmetry as an abstraction of the human mind. Our human minds are wonderful, can do many abstract things. For example, we have designed spheres, the notion of sphere, which is a perfectly symmetric object, which doesn't really exist in nature, but it's really interesting, right? Something that's purely spherical. And these abstractions of the human mind is actually very useful. It's very useful to use them when they serve us and to not use them when they don't. Okay. So if that's the case, then why we get so easily focused on symmetry, right? Why we get so obsessed? Well, as I said before, I believe that symmetry is not something we notice in our everyday life very often, actually. Everything has its little imperfections, the little things that stand out. And this makes things interesting, actually. But because of that, symmetry attracts attention very easily because it looks out of place. It's a bit like this this monolith in Space Odyssey of Stanley Kubrick, that suddenly this perfect object with the smooth surface and the perfect right sharp angles appears in an ancient world. Yeah, it's like it looks out of place. It looks otherworldly. It's like, what is that? So symmetry has a deeper attraction when it comes to our nature. And that's why we have a tendency to go there, to examine it. But at the same time, something that's very symmetric, right, can also get quickly very boring. If it's like very, very symmetric, okay, you know, the item itself is like, okay, it's everywhere the same. Nothing changes. So apart from being the same, what else does it have to say? Yeah, if you look at it from this perspective, it doesn't have much. Okay. So then, okay, yeah, and that's something that already takes us into the direction of appreciating asymmetry more, and maybe even the slight asymmetry that feels like, oh, there is this thing there, but something about it, something I can pinpoint. What is that? So I talked about why symmetry is important. Okay. I talked about why symmetry is important, but I didn't really tell you what symmetry is. I talked about that it offers us organizing principles. I said about that sometimes it does us a disservice, especially on the human experience level, not in the I study the fundamental worlds of nature level. And but what is symmetry? Okay, so consider a vase. Consider a vase like the one you put flowers. Okay, it's perfectly symmetric. however you rotate it, it looks the same. It has no patterns on it. It just looks the same. Okay, so if I change my position according to the vase, I rotate around it, or I rotate the vase itself, the vase always looks the same. Okay? So in life, what does this remind you of? For me, it reminds me the idea when we have a problem and we are stuck with it. No matter what we do, the problem doesn't go away. We keep trying to do different things. We feel we do different things, and we do sometimes things. But the problem stays there. We are stuck in a symmetric way of trying to solve the problem. All the solutions we try are symmetrically related. So the problem remains the same, okay? But so no matter what we do, it doesn't change. But things get different when we change our perspective in life, when we look things from a different angle. Sometimes when we reframe, that's how this is called, things can change. So how can sometimes when we shift our perspectives, things look the same? And sometimes when we shift our perspective, things look different, right? What would be a model of that? So if things in the level of human experience are mostly non-symmetric, here is a model of what may be happening if we pay good enough attention to notice. Okay? So imagine that you have this vase, okay, and you're looking at it. But what if we are looking the vase from a bit too far away? It just looks like a vase with no pattern, completely smooth, nothing. So what will happen if we go closer to the vase and we closely examine and notice the microcracks, the opening where the light of change comes through, right? Then we will notice the vase is not symmetric. And there are ways out, there are cracks out of the problem we are experiencing. So when we are avoiding to examine an issue we're experiencing closer, very typical human behavior, we all do it, we actually stand from too big of a distance from it. And yeah, then we feel we do things, but nothing really changes, and we are stuck with the problem. Okay, so however, here is another interesting situation. Symmetry can also be noticed if we also examine way too closely. Okay? So if we are being so focused in the current state of things, it may be so close to the vase, to the surface of the vase, that even when we rotate it, we don't notice any change because we are lost in detail. We are stuck. We are too close, too much into the problem. So, if we are too close into the vase, we may not even realize actually it's a vase and think it's a flat ceramic surface. So, because then we are too close, we may be doing like really small shifts, but they feel huge because we're looking too close and everything is overstretched. And we feel we're putting too much effort. But in reality, the changes we're doing are so small that we never find the crack out of the situation we are in. Okay, so then taking distance to examine things helps. And that's typically a pattern we people have a tendency to get stuck on. When we have issues, we are in states of avoidance where we are too far from the issue and we think we do things, but we don't dare to notice it because we're afraid. And and then things don't bother us a lot typically there. And then we find ourselves in situations where we are fully into the issue and we are too close into it, and then we feel whatever we do doesn't work. So changing our perspective, changing our focus on how we notice things and the issues in our life can help us find the lack of symmetry in the problem that will allow us to get through it. Because When we change our perspective, things can be different in many different ways. Okay. Well, the simplest thing is we may find an easier way to resolve our issue that we haven't thought before. We look from different perspectives. Actually, sometimes when we look from a different perspective, the issue may not be non-existent at all from that perspective. Okay. This is very typical for chronic pain and other mind-body issues like irritable bowel syndrome or TMJ, the jaw thing. Or finally, we may change our perspective and the issue may kind of look the same, but our relationship to it changes because we find different ways to live with it. The emotional attachment we put into it changes. So we find ways to move forward in life and reduce our suffering. Even if the vase remains just a vase, from being, oh, this vase becomes like, okay, a vase. Okay, so it's actually this change in perspective that realizes different outcomes is what's typically called reframing our reality and experience in terms of NLP, coaching, hypnotherapy. And it's like much like in mathematics, when we do transformations to rotate things around, right? It's a very similar thing. So, okay, and this video is getting a bit longer than I was expecting. Okay. So the question is, with all this in mind, with the question that symmetry can be helpful, but can actually become unhelpful too, with the notion that asymmetry can be very, very helpful and we can notice it if we change how we view things, the distance, the position, do shifts in position and in distance and also around. Okay. What choice do I have? What is the thing we can do? Well, I think it's important that it's not about just embracing asymmetry as part of the world. It's not just accepting it because it's there, but it's also choosing it, making an active choice to go into it and essentially letting go of perfectionism and ideals we may carry in our mind that may not work in real life for us anymore. They may have been working sometime in the past. So, by actively looking for asymmetry, by changing our focus when examining situations, to look for different perspectives and possible outcomes, we can really, really improve our lives, right? And like it's beyond embracing it, beyond choosing it for ourselves, is also to notice it and appreciate, develop an appreciation for it in other people and situations, and just choosing to appreciate it, create with it. And when we create with it, actually bring new things in life that contain it, because it's a very common thing that we may notice our problem, our asymmetry in the present, but we may still have the tendency to want to create a fully ideal, a fully symmetric outcome in the future, right? So I think there is a power in choosing to create new things that have the right to be imperfect. Our creations, whatever this thing is, like the knowledge we create, children we may bring in the world, have the right to be imperfect, and they better be, because difference and imperfection is what makes things interesting. And in a similar way, it's like, the Japanese art of kintsugi, if I remember correctly, which is when an object breaks, a ceramic pot, a plate, right? They glue the pieces together and there is gold in the points where the broken pieces were glued. So there is there an appreciation of the oldness of things and the history they carry. And I think it's very important to develop this appreciation for things versus just chasing an ideal or trying to revert things back to an ideal. So for me personally, learning to work with it and move forward with it allowed me to do more in life. Okay, it allowed me to overcome chronic pain, fatigue, be more appreciative and compassionate to other people, and actually be even more creative. So, it really did a lot of things for me, and I'm still learning in it, right? It's not something I have fully achieved. So that's also accepting that I'm imperfect about being imperfect. So yeah. So, and it's also, as I said before, learning not only to be okay with the way things are, but also learning to be okay to uh with things that are not symmetric, that are being okay with the non-ideal, okay? Being okay with things not working out the way we have them in our mind. Okay? So, yeah, if you are stuck in a problem, if things in your life don't change, no matter what you do, they look too symmetric, notice them in a different way. And that's where also a friend's perspective helps. That's why talking to other people helps. They see our issues from a different point of view. So if you're stuck somewhere, talk to someone about it with anyone you want. And this really helps. This difference in perspective. Someone who looks at the vase from a different point of view and can notice the cracks that can help us. So yeah, asymmetry, not just symmetry, it's a natural thing. It's all around us, and it's not just about embracing it, it's actually about choosing it and going forward in creating our life and shaping our life with asymmetry, appreciation for the imperfection, and the interesting parts in it. And for you, I really wonder, as you listen to this video and it's about to finish, how are you going to embrace asymmetry at some point in your life, and how it helps you to move your focus in different ways with your mind, in the way you notice things, and how this informs you about your life and different situations in it, and how it may even possibly inform you on how you are going to move forward with it. Yeah. So that's what choosing asymmetry and improving your life is all about. Thank you. See you at the next one.